saltwateraquarium.com. In case you haven't guessed by the title of this video, I've moved, and I've actually moved a fairly large distance. And in case you can't tell by the totes with the hang-on back filters noisily running in the background and the cooler with a reef light on it, things did not go according to plan. I've been in my new place for a month, and this is the most I can say for tanks. But my reef tank was a little bit smaller. It had its own special journey, so let's start out with how this tank ended up here in a cooler like this. Okay, it is time to break down the first tank. So my reef tank is going to go up ahead of all of my other tanks. The realtors that we're buying the house with are awesome enough. They are going to let me set it up at their house. So it's taken care of. I don't have to worry about moving 3 tanks all at once. So what I did is I am repurposing this cooler here. You can see it's got a frag rack in the bottom. Some of my corals still have their frag plugs on them, so I thought it would be a great thing to make use of to keep them from bouncing around in here. Now I don't know how many gallons this is. I'm gonna say maybe 4 or 5 gallons. It's not super huge, but it is the night before, so I'm getting everything prepped because we're gonna leave really, really early in the morning. I've got just a small power head that I'm gonna have running in here overnight, and just to keep the water flowing so I don't have to break down a tank at 3:30 in the morning. The fish, I believe, are going to ride in a separate bucket. There's only 3 of them in here, so I'm not super worried, but I do have some large corals that I don't know. I'm a little bit worried whether or not they're all going to fit in this bucket. So stay tuned. I will keep you up to date as I progress. So I was a little bit worried about this candy cane coral because it has so many heads and I wasn't sure what the base looked like. It's been kind of wedged in the sand for a while, but when I took it out, check this out, it still has the original frag plug on it. Cool story, when I bought this, it only had 1 little head on it, and see how large it's grown. So, yay for growth. All right, next large piece. Honestly, I don't recommend doing this with your bare hands. There's a good chance that there are probably bristleworms and stuff like that in here. So yeah, I did use my Vivid Creative aquatic tongs. You can see that they float, so they're not dragging against any of the corals, but look at that, there's another frag plug still on there. Sweet. Look at this worm. Whoa. Okay, so that's where the tank was. This is where the tank is at right now. So I don't know if you noticed, there used to be a whole bunch of sand. Originally, I was set on keeping all of sand, but once I got down to it, I decided, nope, absolutely not. That's going to be a nightmare when it comes to setting it back up again, and I'm probably going to have to, or probably going to see some ammonia spikes. So if I'm going to basically try and start to recycle a tank, I might as well start with all new sand. That being said, the tank is not going to be able to be set up right away, and since I have a sand sifting goby, I didn't want him to feel too lost, so I saved a cup of sand that I'm going to transport. So I emptied and cleaned everything out. I kind of put everything back where it goes to have easy setup once I get to my destination, and I've got a towel, everything that I'm going to need to set up. So obviously the towel, because probably gonna make a mess, but I've got spare pumps, I've got test kits in the bottom to test everything. I've got my Dr. Tim's one and only down in here. I've got some First Defense down in here, just because I'm sure they're gonna be stressed out and need an immune boost after all of this. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, a spare air pump just in case. And yeah. Okay, so I originally had the idea of putting everybody in this little cooler thing. Obviously that did not work, not nearly enough space. But you can see I got a good chunk of my corals in there, and they've been in this bin for probably 2.5, 3 hours now, and they all seem to be doing relatively okay. There was a couple of rocks with mushrooms on them that I could not fit in here and I wasn't super attached to, so I moved them into my 180-gallon sump that will be coming up next week. Alright, so in this bucket, I had a rock with a rather large leather frag on there. I didn't want to frag it and then put it in transport and move it and stress it out. I'm sure it would have handled it, but I'm going to a different climate, so I didn't want to risk it. So I went ahead and put it in a little plastic container. I'm going to put a lid on that container for traveling so that the fish can't get in it. I've heard horror stories, and I wouldn't put such heavy objects in there with fish. Just the car might jostle them around, and I don't want them accidentally getting crushed. So I'm going to close that up, but have it all in there. So I've got portable air stones as well to use. You can see my goby moving around down there. He's not happy at all. And then I also have a damsel in there as well. So got my air stones, got my heater, thermometer, I've got my sponge biofilter. That's just, I want to keep that wet and moist for the ride. And this is a 6-gallon bucket. I don't know if you are familiar with salinity, I think is what it's called. Maybe. Yeah. With salinity, I just reuse these salt buckets when I get them, and they're super handy. I've got a lid on it that has holes drilled into it so I can keep the air bubbler in there going during the drive. Yeah, so since I am packed up and done for the night, lid is going on. Since everyone in this bucket is super jumpy and not happy to be in there, before I closed this up and started this video, I did put some of Dr. Tim's First Defense in there. It is an immune booster, and it helps them to de-stress, so hopefully it's not super traumatic for them. But yeah, tomorrow morning everything will get unplugged and put in the car. Week. Anytime I'm able to get salt in these 5-gallon buckets, I usually do, just because I can almost always reuse the buckets and they come in super handy for traveling. But another thing that I have prepared, so this guy right here is full of salt water and this is full of RO. Just because I'm setting it up at somebody's house, this is gonna go with the ATO, so I'm just gonna like set it all up like I would have at my house. But I want to take as much salt water as I can fit with me, so that's less trips that I have to make to a fish store when I get up there, and I can just set it up and go. Okay, big reveal. So late last night, early this morning, at like 3:30 a.m. got into the hotel, so I went ahead. Tank temperature was still good. I checked that because this is like a little insulated cooler. It held the temperature pretty good. I also have a pump, like a little mini return pump that I put in here to circulate water. Since it's stagnant, yesterday while I was driving, it did lose a little bit of water, but I think the water was sloshing around enough and there was enough water movement in the container that everything was pretty much good, with the exception of my candy canes, which you can see, instead of being in one large colony, they are now in 4 separate pieces. But overall this morning, everything looks relatively okay for all of the bouncing around in the truck as it did for about 22 hours yesterday. I think it's in much better shape than I expected. I did add some Dr. Tim's First Defense in this container and in the container that I have the fish in. This is really good for immune support and stress relief. It's got a lot of vitamins in there, and it's, you know, you can recommend it using for fragging and all sorts of stuff. So a little bit of this in both of these buckets helped. The fish didn't get fed the day before we left, so they are doing good, and I'm not feeding them while I'm traveling. You can see there is my goby down there. I think my clownfish has been hanging out at the bottom too, so yep. So So everybody in here did relatively good, aside from stress. So all in all, everything made it. My candy cane coral got fragged into 4 pieces, but the tank is set up at the realtor's house with the ATO, and everything is good to go until I can bring it home and set it up in the new place. Well, it seems like a happy ending, right? The tank, the fish, the corals, they all made it. A couple of corals were fragged in a couple of places, but it's not, because here's my reef tank in a cooler with a light on top of it and a screen. What I failed to notice during the haste of setting up that tank at the realtor's house was that 3 of the 4 bottom corners of that tank were cracked. Now, did it make it for 2 weeks at the realtor's house without leaks? Yeah, sure. But did I want to risk setting it back up in a tank that I knew was cracked for it to leak in my brand new house? No, not really. So that's why it's here in this cooler until I can get a replacement tank potential upgrade. Alright, this has been Hilary for Waterlogged on behalf of saltwateraquarium.com. I hope you've enjoyed this video, but please come back to watch part 2 where I move my large tanks. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.